Commissioner Ben-Veniste.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony here today. I'd like to start with Mr. Ziglar, if I may. I was particularly interested in your analysis of the failures, as you perceive them, that led up to the 9/11 catastrophe. And indeed, I have made statements from time to time from this vantage point about the fact that we had a considerable amount of collected intelligence prior to 9/11, but it seems as though our failures involved the inability to disseminate and utilize that information in a way in which we could interdict those individuals who participated in the 9/11 plot. And so, particularly since I agree with you, I'm very interested in that analysis. I'd like to ask you, in the run-up to September 11th, we have received a great deal of information about the type, the quality, and the volume of information that was being received by our intelligence community, indicating that something big was going to happen. Admittedly, the emphasis in looking at this information was toward an attack upon U.S. interests on foreign soil. But clearly the intelligence community did not and could not and would not rule out the possibility of a violent attack on the homeland. Let me ask you, sir, whether you were advised, or to the best of your knowledge, INS was advised, that we were, in the summer of 2001, in a heightened period of alert with respect to the possibility of jihadist or Islamic fundamentalist terrorist activity.
The answer, sir, is that I was not briefed or advised that there was any particular concern at the time, nor am I aware of anyone in our national security unit or intelligence folks being aware of that. If they were, I'm not aware of it.
What makes this particularly troublesome is the fact that from June 1, 2001 forward, at least nine of the participants in the catastrophe of 9/11 entered into the United States. 9 of them came in after June 1, 2001. During this period of increased, certainly in the midst of this period of increased volume and quality of potential terrorist activity, and 9 at least came in between April and May. Now, had you been a partner, putting aside an equal partner, at least a recipient of the kind of information that was setting the hair on fire of other people elsewhere in the government because of the dramatic nature of this information, what might you have been able to do?
Of course, you're asking me a question, a hypothetical question, because I wasn't there, but if I had known we had information about specific individuals and specific threats, I think the first thing we would have done immediately is to put that information into what was called nails.
Well, let's take that off the table, because clearly, with the exception of 2 individuals who were not watch listed, there was no specific information that was within the data bank of the U.S. However, as you have heard this morning, or maybe you haven't.
I'm sorry I wasn't here.
But our staff has developed a very broad and detailed analysis of the travel documents that were utilized, as well as the profiles of the individuals. Had you been notified that you were in a situation, that we were in a situation of high alert during this period, could you have taken steps that might have interdicted any of these individuals?
Well, I certainly think that the field operations people would have put out an alert to all inspectors that there is a heightened concern, and that we would have probably at that point put a whole lot more people into secondary for both questioning and inspection of their documents. It would seem to me that would be a fundamental thing that you would do. You would also go out to all the district offices for your special agents internally and put out the word that there was a high alert, and if you had a name or something, that would go to the top of the priority list of people that they would be looking for. I mean, those would be the normal course of events sort of things. We had a national security unit, or have, I guess we still have it, I assume, a national security unit there that was responsible for working with the field on particularly national security kinds of cases. They would have been activated in a very targeted way.
Let me ask you about 9/11 itself and the immediate aftermath. One of the things that occurred in the immediate aftermath was the order from the Attorney General to take steps with respect to foreign visitors in this country who had, in one way or another, been in violation of their immigration status. Let me ask you whether you took a position with respect to this program.
Yes, sir, I did. I suggested that it needed to be targeted to those folks that we had some kind of reasonable suspicion to believe might have some kind of connections first, that we should avoid the appearance of being involved in any kind of harassment or sweep or roundup or any of that sort of thing for some very fundamental fairness reasons, but also because I thought that it would probably scare the community that we would be looking for to cooperate with us. So I did express that point of view.
You saw a blanket effort to detain individuals who were out of status as counterproductive because of its general scope?
I thought that it had the potential of being counterproductive, yes, sir.
And did you express a view with respect to its legality?
Yes, sir.
Let me read from your statement at page 15. A public record has been established indicating that INS personnel, including me, raised questions and concerns about the appropriateness of certain policies and practices that were being pursued by the Department of Justice in the investigation. I considered it my duty to raise my hand when I felt that the bounds of law were being approached, or where a practice or policy was ineffective, ill-advised, or violated notions of fundamental fairness. I make no apologies for doing what I believe to be my duty. You go on to say, we have a long history in our country, particularly in times of crisis, of incorrectly assuming that there is a clear nexus between immigration and terrorism or anarchy. Our public discourse needs to be better informed. This commission bears a particular burden in that respect. I agree with you. Would you like to elaborate on that point?
I think it says what I feel, sir. I'm not sure I could elaborate on it.
Can you tell us, on the basis of your observation of how that policy was carried out, whether there were any terrorists or suspected terrorists who were arrested in connection with that sweep?
I'm not aware of any.
Let me turn to Mr. Bonner, if I may. Obviously mindful of what I think Commissioner Grelick has earlier indicated in this long day of hearings, that we're not going to obviously talk about specific instances where our staff or we have perceived holes in the procedures, practices, or policies that are now in place. But let me ask you generally with respect to container security, which you have brought up in your statement. It has been widely discussed that only a very, very small percentage of shipping containers coming into this country from foreign ports are physically inspected. Can you provide some details with respect to that and whether there is a program underfoot to increase the physical inspection of shipping containers?
You're happy to. First of all, there's sort of one of the urban myths is that 2% of the containers, trucks that come into the U.S. are inspected. And the reality is, of course, we've been increasing the rate of our inspections, but the premise, the underlying premise for our inspection is a risk management one that posits that with the right strategic intelligence, the right anomaly analysis, the right detection equipment, you don't necessarily have to inspect all containers coming into the U.S. If you have to do that, we don't have the resources to do it, and I think it actually would be rather foolish, a waste of resources. But basically, I can tell you that if you take all cargo shipments, which basically would be both trucks and ocean-going cargo containers, the number is close to 10%.
And if you limited yourself to ocean-going containers?
If you limit it to ocean-going containers, it's between 4 and 5%. I mean, it goes ups and downs. It varies. But I will hasten to add, as I think you know, Mr. Ben-Veniste, that the premise here is that we actually get information on all containers that come into the United States before they arrive. We do an analysis of those containers. We select out the ones that we think pose a potential risk for the terrorist threat, and we screen through both radiation detection and large-scale imaging equipment 100% of those containers. Now, with CSI, of course, we're doing more and more of that, not just on arrival at U.S. seaports, but where we have CSI in place, doing it at the outbound ports before they're even loaded on board vessels to the U.S.
So, is it fair to say that since 9/11, the percentage, the quantity of shipping containers from overseas ports have increased?
Yes. Unquestionably.
And
probably in the order of doubled or tripled.
So pre-9/11 it might have been about 2%, and now it's 4 or 5?
By the way, I don't know that it was 2% before 9/11. I mean, I don't know where that figure comes from.
If it's 4% now,
but I feel confident.
It's doubled,
I feel confident that it's increased by 100%, and I actually think it may well be more than that.
Do you have a goal, a target?
Yes.
As to the where you'd want to be? Can you share that with us?
Yes. The goal is to screen and do a security inspection for 100% of all containers that we identify as potentially risky for the terrorist threat. And I believe we are doing that. That's the goal, and I think we're either doing it or we're very close to doing it at ports of arrival into the U.S., and we're now, through the extended border strategy, being able to do that more at foreign seaports before they're shipped to the U.S.
Do I understand you to say that you are at your target now?
We are, yes, I think we are at or close to our target, which is to say that one thing I didn't mention in my testimony for lack of time is that one of the things that we set up in October of 2001 for the first time in the history of customs was a national targeting center to target all containers. It also gets all the information on arriving passengers too, but all containers that are coming to the U.S. and essentially taking strategic intelligence and developing targeting rules. There are 150, 200 targeting rules in the system to score and target for potential threat. Doesn't mean they're an actual terrorist threat, but because of a variety of factors, we have identified those containers that pose a potential security threat, terrorist threat. And with respect to those, I believe we are screening 100%. Every one of those we've identified as a potential terrorist threat, according to our targeting rules that have been set up through the targeting center by U.S. Customs. By the way, it's a 24/7 watch that takes all this information and essentially evaluates it and analyzes it through these rules. Now, by the way, we are a consumer of intelligence. And it's not just tactical, specific intelligence, what container or what person may be a terrorist, but we're a consumer of strategic intelligence too. And so some of our rules are informed by what we get through the intelligence community and the FBI to inform us as to how we set our rules.
Well, I may
say that's the methodology. It's a risk management methodology to identify every container that poses a potential risk and then make sure every container is screened for security purposes.
I must say that I had the occasion to observe a border security operation by the Customs Service at the Niagara Falls U.S.-Canadian crossing and was very impressed with the dedication of the individuals who were working there and the level of instruction that they had obviously received. Let me ask you this. With respect to the inspections that you have conducted with respect to both land and sea containers since 9/11, have you interdicted any containers that would be regarded as directed toward terrorist activities in the United States?
I can't say that there are any that are directly related to terrorist activities. We have interdicted containers that contained automatic weapons. We've interdicted containers that contained essentially anti-chemical exposure kinds of suits and things like that. But I can't say that they're directly connected with terrorism, but I can say that the system works. I'd also say, since you were up at Niagara, you also saw that I believe you saw that there are portal radiation monitors there for the coming across those bridges, both trucks and passenger vehicles. They didn't exist on 9/11, so we're getting a radiation read on every vehicle, truck and passenger vehicle. We also have deployed, which didn't exist on 9/11, large-scale X-ray imaging machines so we can do whole container truck X-rays and images, which we didn't have on 9/11. We've done that. We put these in place on the northern border and at seaports of our country and the like. So
getting a lot of hits on cancer patients who have
we get some hits on. We do get some hits on cancer patients occasionally that are in vehicles crossing the Mexican or the northern border.
Let me ask you briefly about your statement about the day of 9/11, which I found very interesting. You say that on the morning of 9/11, through an evaluation of data related to the passenger manifest of the 4 terrorist hijacked aircraft, Customs Office of Intelligence was able to identify the likely terrorist hijackers. Within 45 minutes of the attack, Customs forwarded the passenger list with the names of the victims and 19 probable hijackers to the FBI and the intelligence community. How were your people able to do that?
Well, it was pretty simple. Actually, we were able to pull from the airlines the passenger manifest for each of the 4 flights. We ran the manifest through the TEX-IBIS system. This is essentially the lookout system that both U.S. Customs and INS used, but it's maintained by Customs. We ran it through the system. Two of the passengers on those aircraft were hits for having been entered on the watch list in August of 2001.
Right.
That was Al Itar, and I've forgotten the other one's name, but they were the 2 people that had gone to Singapore that the CIA had identified. But they actually were put on the watch list in August of 2001 by the FBI. So they hit on those 2, and just using those 2 hits and taking a look at some other just basic data about the flight manifest, both in terms of, I don't want to go into a lot of detail, but where they were seated, where they had purchased the tickets, you could do just a quick link analysis. And essentially, I remember I was at Secret Service headquarters, as I said, but I would say, whether it was 45 minutes or not, I don't know. My recollection is it was certainly by 11 a.m. I'd seen a sheet that essentially identified the 19 probable hijackers. And in fact, they turned out to be, based upon further follow-up and detailed FBI investigation, to be the 19.
Was this more than looking at the 2 who were hits and then checking out the other Arab names?
Well, it was partly that, by the way, but it was more than that. No, it was seat location, ticket purchase information. Again, I don't know, on the public record here, I don't want to go into exact details since we use some of this information in terms of targeting today, I mean, for potential terrorists. We actually use, as I was saying, advanced passenger information to identify beyond just who's on the watch list by biographic, but to try to do a more intelligent job as to, who is the combined immigration inspection, customs and border protection. Who would you ask a few questions to if they're arriving in the United States? So you're doing more than just looking at a watch list. You're looking at a lot of data and trying to figure out who to look at, just as the same way we're looking at what cargo to look at by examining a multitude of factors that is to some extent strategic intelligence driven. So it was looking at a bunch of relational data. Obviously more refinement of that occurred later, but it was it didn't take a lot to do just a sort of what I'd say a rudimentary link analysis to identify essentially all 19.
With respect to Mr. Verga, I was obviously we don't have time to go into we could spend the whole day on certainly or more on each of your areas of expertise, but I'm interested in the question of the use of the military within the continental United States. And in your statement, you indicated that there were several statutory exceptions to the Posse Comitatus Act, including Public Law 10740, authorizing the President to use military force to prevent further terrorist acts against the nation. And in that regard, I wasn't familiar with it, but I found that this was this was a law passed by Congress 7 days after 9/11, and I'd be interested to hear from you how the Department of Defense feels that this is a modification or exemption to the Posse Comitatus Act.
First, let me stipulate I am not an attorney, and I would, obviously, for an official DOD legal reading on any interpretation of the law, I would defer to our general counsel. My understanding is that the Posse Comitatus Act provides that military forces may not be used to enforce civil law except as otherwise provided by Congress through the enactment of any other legislation. I believe that our view of that particular statute is that it was not limited to overseas use of the military forces, and therefore it could be construed to, in fact, be a exception to the Posse Comitatus law as enacted by Congress. But as I said, I would defer to either a former DOD General Counsel who is a member of the Commission or to our current General Counsel for an official reading on it.
I would ask that, if possible, something be submitted in writing as to that
Certainly.
interpretation. I'm also interested in the mission that you've indicated with respect to Northcom. Northcom has, if I understand correctly, and the military has for some time, assisted in the interdiction of narcotics traffic into the United States, either by plane or vessel. Do you interpret the mandate of Northcom now to provide similar assistance with respect to anti-terrorist activities?
You very correctly state that the Department of Defense is by law the lead federal agency for the interdiction of air and maritime drug traffic into the United States. United States Northern Command operates, part of their subordinate elements are Joint Task Force 6, located in El Paso, Texas, which orchestrates the military's involvement in that activity, along with our joint interagency task forces, East and West, which also help work the interagency aspects of it. There was a recent change in the law which allows the joint interagency task forces previously established for counter-narcotics use to be used in the counter-terrorist role, and we're undertaking that at this time. Now, the question, I think, that arises from that is the active use of military forces in interdicting traffic back and forth across the border. And again, that comes to the sort of public policy decision that the Border Control Authority for the United States is not the United States military, but our civilian agencies. We do assist those civilian agencies by providing them information or, for example, flying helicopter patrols along the southern border and then passing that information of what we may observe onto the civilian law enforcement agencies.
Do you anticipate that that is a function which will also be supplied in connection with counterterrorism?
I think it's one of those questions of it's difficult. If you identify somebody who's trying to sneak across the border, you can't tell why they're trying to sneak across. You just know that they are, and therefore you pass that on to the appropriate authorities. It would be useful in a counterterrorist role.
Does Northcom have an intelligence capability? Does it have its own intelligence unit?
It has its own intelligence analysis capability, as do all our combatant commands. The J2 in military jargon is the intelligence officer for the command, and they take intelligence product and analyze it based on the particular command's mission. We collect intelligence only in accordance with the applicable laws, which restrict the collection of intelligence inside the United States, principally to counterintelligence in conjunction with the FBI.
So if I understand you correctly, the Department of Defense interprets its mission on Northcom with respect to force protection or any other traditional intelligence component of a command such as Northcom, if it were outside the United States, to restrict the military from the collection function.
Yeah, from the gathering and collecting of intelligence inside the United States. That's correct.
And it is, however, a customer of collected intelligence. Is that correct?
That's correct as well.
And in looking at your detailed statement at page 8, you list a pretty good shopping list that goes on to page 9 of examples of technology transfer specific to the areas of border and transportation security where the Department of Defense is making a contribution. Do you anywhere indicate the data mining project that was initiated at DARPA or was then brought through this total information awareness, which became terrorist information awareness under Admiral Poindexter?
I did not indicate that in my written statement, nor have we passed that technology on to any other agencies as of this time. There are two very similar programs. That one, which is the opportunity to use, I don't like the term data mining, but data correlation, I think, is probably a more appropriate term. Data correlation techniques to do exactly what the Commissioner talked about, doing manually post 9/11, but doing it in an automated basis. We also have a joint protection enterprise network, which is a DoD network which we use for force protection purposes, which is the ability to exchange relevant information among the military commands associated with force protection inside the United States.
Was there some, that program that had been initiated in DARPA, does that continue?
The research on that is continuing as of now.
Okay. And if Northern Command is a customer for collected intelligence, does that include intelligence about U.S. citizens?
Only to the extent that it's permitted by law for Northcom to have information about U.S. persons. We conduct all of our intelligence activities inside the United States or outside the United States in accordance with the applicable law. And there are restrictions on the types of information that the Department of Defense can collect or hold on U.S. persons. If it's relative to the protection of U.S. installations or property, equipment, a criminal investigation, or a counterintelligence investigation, then military intelligence activities could keep and hold that information. Otherwise, they're not permitted to.
Would you agree that the creation of Northcom now provides a much broader need in the traditional sense for force protection or other intelligence?
I don't think it creates any additional need. What Northcom and the Northern Command provides is a centralized command structure to undertake military activities that are authorized inside the United States. They have currently only command and control type forces or headquarters assigned to them. They receive forces on an as-needed basis should they be required to come to the assistance of another federal agency in response to the consequences of a terrorist attack. But it did not create any additional need just by the creation of Northern Command. The responsibilities for force protection remained where they were before with the services, for example, or with Joint Forces Command, which had the forces prior to the creation of Northcom.
Thank you very much.